You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet. Sleep. We all need it, we all do it, but are we getting enough of it? Insomnia is the world's most prevalent sleep disorder and affects about 10% of the population. But I want to know what health conditions we're sleepwalking into by not having enough. Recent research from the University of Surrey suggests as little as 1 week of inadequate sleep is enough to alter the activity of hundreds of human genes. So with me to discuss sleep and hopefully not drop off is Professor Russell Foster, a neuroscientist and sleep expert at the University of Oxford. Dr. Michelle Miller, founder of the Sleep Health and Society Research Programme and Associate Professor at Warwick University. Richard Gray is from the Sunday Telegraph and is a science correspondent who's written about his own struggle with insomnia. And Simon Lee is co-founder of Locassa, an app development studio in London. So we will be talking sleep apps later on. First of all, though, Professor Foster, can you define what sleep is?
Well, it's easier said than done. I mean, there are a range of behavioural criteria for sleep. So depending upon what species you're talking about, there's a stereotypical or species-specific posture. It's usually associated with minimal movement. There's reduced responsiveness to external stimuli. And critically, it's a state which, if you deprive individuals of this state, then they show more of it the next day. So if you deprive individuals of sleep, they tend to show compensatory sleep. They will be the behavioral criteria. But I suppose in our species, we tend to use the stages of EEG, electroencephalograms, these electrodes that we attach to the skull, to the surface of the skin over the skull, and they record gross brain activity. And as one goes through different sleep stages, you get a change in the pattern of this electrical activity. So that's how we tend to define sleep, I guess, in our own species.
Do you think we, as human beings, understand sleep? Or do we need to become more obsessed by what it means and the chemicals associated to it in order to sleep better or find a perfect sleep balance?
I think one of the great confusions about sleep is that it's when the brain is shut down and not doing anything. And, of course, it's during sleep where so many critical processes are going on. Memory consolidation, the assimilation of information that's coming in through the day and trying to make sense of it. Actually, our ability to come up with novel solutions to complex problems is enormously enhanced by a night of sleep. And yet we don't appreciate this. And so sleep is often, I think, sort of considered as this illness that needs a cure. And people simply don't appreciate the importance of sleep and how much sleep we need to actually allow a perfectly normal and healthy life. So it's been marginalized by society at all levels. And it's, of course, in stark contrast to the way we thought of sleep in the Middle Ages or before the invention of electric light, when sleep was applauded at so many, lots of poetry about sleep.
I'm going to come to you, Richard Gray, from the Sunday Telegraph, just to talk about your struggle with insomnia and pick up from what Professor Foster said. How much do you appreciate sleep?
I appreciate sleep hugely. It's very. I think my own problems with it is it showed me how important sleep is. I'm just going to touch on something that Professor Foster said there, which is the ability to tackle problems. Improves immeasurably after sleep. That whole idea of sleeping on it, it really is true. You without enough sleep, it becomes very difficult to really tackle the problems that you're going to face during the day. And I found that definitely, that with less and less sleep, I found it much harder to then try and cope with the challenges I faced the day after. Can
you tell us a little bit about the insomnia that you've suffered then?
Sure, yeah. Well, I've always had problems sleeping. It's even as a child, I wasn't really particularly interested in going to bed and sleeping. That's perhaps not unusual for children, I don't think. But I all the way through university, I found that I would have difficulty dropping off. I would not. I would stay awake for quite long periods of time through the night and then really not get enough sleep. But a couple of years ago, I suddenly started also then waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to get back to sleep. And that was something quite new for me. I hadn't really experienced that before, and it became quite troublesome. I would be waking up at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and then just lying there stewing about the fact that I couldn't get back to sleep. And it really started to affect me.
Did you try and get help for that, or any advice on what to do when you woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Well, fortunately, because I'm a science correspondent for the Sunday Telegraph, I was able to use my job as an excuse to go and find some help. So I tackled I like to tackle problems by addressing them head on and finding things out about them, finding out more, and that's kind of what I do in my in my day-to-day job as well. So I decided I was going to write about it. I then phoned quite a lot of researchers who've been doing work in this area, and asked them about sleep, asked them about insomnia, the underlying reasons for it, and then also went to see some scientists at Warwick University to try and find out about my own sleep. And so we did a piece of research. It was fairly ad hoc because it was only one person. It was just me, but looking at my sleep patterns and trying to understand perhaps the underlying reasons for why I wasn't sleeping well.
Are you any closer to understanding why you don't sleep?
I think I have a good idea. It was more essentially it's like a lot of insomnia. It's about worry. You start to worry about things. At the time, it seems that there's a trigger for insomnia. So people tend to be. I think there's the prevalence for insomnia is very high, and I think often it tends to be a trigger that sparks it off. And in my case, I was having relationship difficulties. I was having stress at work, and all of these things combined to mean that I was waking up in the middle of the night and worrying about it. And what you do find is that you then worry about not being able to sleep. So I tried to think about how I could then tackle that and how I could overcome it.
It's a vicious circle in some ways. Dr. Michelle Miller, you're the founder of Sleep Health and Society. Do we as society understand sleep or give it the respect it kind of deserves?
I don't think we give it the full respect that it deserves. I think we compensate our activities when we in the 24/7 society that we've got today. We tend to think, I want to pack in a lot of things into my day. I can do lots of things. What can I curtail? Well, sleep is something that you can easily just think, well, I won't sleep so much. I can get all these activities in. And I think that's the problem we're developing in society. We don't appreciate that sleep is important. And we've been looking at sleep from a population's perspective. So we're looking at large populations and looking at how long people in a population sleep, and then looking at various health outcomes to see, does short sleep, for example, lead to poor health outcomes? And from the work that we've been conducting, we've shown that if you're a short-sleeping individual, then you're more likely to develop obesity, hypertension, type 2 diabetes. You're more likely to have an increase in cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease, and strokes. So from a population perspective, we do believe that this curtailment of sleep could actually lead to detrimental health outcomes.
You're talking about the curtailment of sleep and associating it to a 24/7 lifestyle, and that's invaded the nighttime, which I suppose draws me quite nicely onto you, Simon, because you're a founder of an app development studio in London, making apps on smartphones that we're all obsessed about looking at all the time when we wake up, when we go to bed. And you yourself use sleep apps.
I do, yes. I mean, there's two distinct strands for apps to deal with sleep problems. The first of those to get you to relax at the end of the day. I live a very busy lifestyle. So one of the first things I do when I get back is there's lots of kind of ambience type apps that play nice music or have kind of running water or rain, that kind of thing. And those are very effective. And the beautiful thing about technology is all of this stuff gets smaller and smaller. So the ability to now put your phone under your pillow and have some kind of babbling brook, going whilst you're sleeping is something that we couldn't do before with kind of laptops and desktops, that kind of thing. The other flip side to that as well are the apps that actually use some of the newer technology in the phone, so like the accelerometers and the device moving. The idea is that you put those on your mattress. It detects what part of your sleep cycle you're in. You set, the range of time that you want to wake up, and it picks the best time when you're most likely to wake up and feel alert and that kind of thing, and then promotes further, sleep the next night.
How do they know when the best time is to wake you up?
Okay, so this is one of the things that apparently a lot of these apps have done scientific studies. The thing for me, I don't use that particular side of things. I use the more relaxation ones. The thing for me with those particular ones is you pick the time that you want to wake up in a half-hour window, and it apparently can tell how much you move in bed, and it determines what part of the sleep cycle you're in. The only problem with that is obviously if there's two people in the bed, that kind of thing, it moves around. And then also some of these, amazing new mattresses apparently don't move at all when you move anyway. So how effective those are, I'm not entirely sure. But that's the general principle, that they look for patterns of movement that have been linked to, particular cycles of sleep and wake you up at the appropriate time.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia, where we're talking about sleep or lack of it. I'm joined by Dr. Michelle Miller, Associate Professor at Warwick University, Richard Gray, the Sunday Telegraph science correspondent, Simon Lee, who develops apps, and Professor Russell Foster, an expert in sleep at Oxford University. Should we embrace technology to help us find a cure for insomnia or monitor the effect a lack of sleep is having on health? Professor Foster.
The science is actually pretty well advanced in that area, in the sense that we ideally should wake from REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, and that's how we wake naturally. And what they do is, during rapid eye movement sleep, we're effectively paralyzed from the waist down, from the neck down, and so they monitor that sort of movement. And ideally you should wake from REM sleep, not slow wave sleep, deep sleep, because it takes you a hell of a long time to wake up from deep sleep. And so there's a nice logic there. I would agree with Simon. I don't think that they're quite up to the task just yet, but we're going in that direction. Yeah, I think anything that's going to allow us to take sleep more seriously is something that we should promote. I mean, one of the things which is a really serious issue, is light exposure before we go to bed. I mean, even relatively low levels of light will increase our levels of alertness and therefore delay sleep onset. So in addition to the sort of the winding down things that Simon was talking about, it's also very important to spend the hour before going to bed in a dimmer light as possible. And certainly don't sit in front of the computer screen playing video games, for example. In an increasingly 24/7 society, sleep is always the first victim, and we cram more and more into the day. And again, it's quite fascinating the way we think about it. We never think of I suppose, leaving for work in the morning without washing or cleaning our teeth or whatever. And yet we are perfectly happy to sort of disregard this fundamental bit of our biology without a second thought.
Why has it taken so long now, though, for people to put a focus or research and find out how societies sleep? Michelle?
We're looking at sleep from lots of different perspectives at the moment. We're looking from the population perspective that we're looking from. We're looking at sleep from the biochemicals perspective. We're looking at sleep from behavioural perspective. And I think there's a combination of evidence that has suddenly all come together to make us realise that sleep is important, and not only to understand that sleep is important and it can lead to some of these adverse health outcomes, but to actually begin to understand what the mechanisms are for that. And I think that's made us appreciate more that there is a real reason for this. That once you begin to understand there's a mechanism whereby short sleep leads to a poor outcome, you begin to think, yes, this is more important. It's building the evidence. And I think we've just come to a critical time where the evidence is there, and we're now beginning to believe that sleep is important.
Do you think there's a slight conflict then, though, with the rise of technology and how it can assist sleep and the role that technology has 24/7 in our lives? I'll come to you, I think, Richard.
Yeah, I would say it does. I mean, certainly from my own experience, I found that not checking my phone before going to bed, not watching television while in bed, not doing anything which was sort of making me think about work, certainly not playing computer games, as Professor Foster said, not really something that I was worried about. But there's definitely a tendency for people to be far more obsessed with, checking their smartphone or checking their iPad app or using the laptop in bed. And I think that was one of the things that I was aware of and was very guilty of doing, and so I now try to avoid doing that. It's one of the things that I've now adopted doing to try and improve my sleep. Also, when I wake up, no matter what time it is, whether that's in the morning or in the middle of the night, the first thing that I now don't do is not to reach for my. I don't reach for my phone. I was doing that, so I'd reach for my phone to look at emails and that's very detrimental because it immediately kicks your brain into working again and makes it very difficult to go back to sleep.
And that's the role that the smartphones have had in becoming a one-stop shop for everything that you say has invaded the nighttime. But obviously you, as someone who produces apps, think, this is your life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very guilty of that kind of reaching for the phone and checking emails. I mean, when you think that it's only in the more recent versions of the Apple devices that they've now got this Do Not Disturb feature. So you can still receive all of your communications, you can still have the alarm turned on, but nothing will get put through. So there's no audio that comes out. So if you get an email, there's no alert. There's nothing, the screen doesn't turn on. But that's only in the past kind of 6 to 8 months that's actually been added to these devices. So I think it shows that people are thinking, well, I still want to have all of that communication available, but there are times when I want to say, actually, I want to switch this off and not be disturbed.
Professor Foster, can you define then, is there 3 different sort of types of sleepers, short, long, and I suppose in the middle?
The sleep patterns are hugely variable, and so you can be somebody who's a lark and they like to go to bed early and get up early. There are owls who go to bed very late, and then get up very late. And those larks and owls have been associated with tiny changes in some of the genes that give rise to the molecular biological clock that either speed up or slow down the clock. And so we're getting, as Michelle was saying, some fundamental insight into the mechanisms that are generating those sorts of sleep types. And then you have fragmented sleep, a bit like Richard, who's waking up in the middle of the night. I mean, one of the things that's quite interesting, though, is that if our sleep patterns today are rather different from they were before electric light. And in societies where they use just natural light, at dusk there's a 2-hour winding down, then a 4-hour consolidated sleep, and then people will wake up and walk around, maybe for half an hour, then another 4 hours of consolidated sleep, and then 2 hours of sort of slow waking. And so an interrupted night may actually be a sort of a throwback to an earlier sleep pattern. And when I hear of people like Richard, I say, for goodness sake, don't panic. We used to sleep bimodally in these 2 patterns, and just relax. If you want to get up, then keep the lights as low as possible, and don't get stressed about it.
Where did the obsession arrive then that we had to have this 8 hours sleep a night? Are they guidelines?
That's very much a guideline. And so how much sleep do you need? Well, if you are utterly dependent upon an alarm clock to get you out of bed in the morning, if you're feeling tired and it takes you a long time to actually fully wake up, if you're feeling tired during the day and irritable, you have a lack of a sense of humor, if your colleagues are commenting on the fact that, you're not the sort of the bright, chirpy person you used to be, you're simply not getting enough sleep. And so what you ideally should do is work out, let's 8 hours is a good baseline. But some people need more. I mean, teenagers need a good 9 hours for full cognitive function. So our sleep patterns will change also as we develop.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia, where we're talking about sleep or the lack of it. With me here is Richard Gray, the Sunday Telegraph science correspondent, Simon Lee, who develops apps, Professor Russell Foster, an expert in sleep at Oxford University, and Dr. Michelle Miller, Associate Professor at Warwick University. There was a recent article that suggested that parents weren't teaching their children to sleep properly and by always providing activities for them to do. What do you think about that, Michelle? Do you think that the future generations are going to rely or are going to be less obsessed by sleep and will not know how to sleep?
I think there is a danger that the children's bedrooms are becoming more interesting. They're not places to go to sleep. They've got their computers, they've got their phones, they've got, they're constantly texting their friends. So the bedroom environment has become an interesting place rather than a place for sleep. So there is a danger that they could want to go to their bedroom to go not to go to sleep. Maybe we need to address that issue and actually say, a bedroom environment is for sleep, and remove some of these gadgetries that they can have access to, and then that might improve their sleep. We don't want people to be fearful of sleep, that they've got to get so much sleep, and that causes stress. But at the same time, we want them to be able to be in an environment that is conducive to sleep, to allow them to sleep. And picking up on the point, we were talking about children. we have shown that short sleep in children is linked to obesity. We do know we've got an increase in epidemic of obesity in the country. So, maybe we should be being more concerned about our children's sleep. But we also need to understand that children have different sleep patterns to adults. And we know that children tend to want to get up later and to go to bed later than adults, and that there is a biological reason for that. And our sleep patterns don't come into an adult pattern until we're 21. And there's been some discussion that maybe school should start later, and that would be better for children because that's the time when they are more alert and more awake. So maybe a 10 o'clock start and a later finish for children would actually be better in line with their sleep pattern.
Yes, I mean, in fact, I'm partly responsible for proposing that and working with this school in Monks Eaton, based upon the data that has come out of the United States and Germany. In fact, this school went on to a later start pattern. But I think as well as a later start, then you've also got to have the sleep hygiene as well. Otherwise, if the teenagers don't understand the importance of sleep, then they'll just go to bed later and later, and it won't actually be of much use. But again, as Michelle was saying, the efficacy of getting up, of starting school later, has been associated with a significant increase in test scores, a drop in truantism, a drop in self-harm, and a drop in teenage depression. So it can work and have a really major impact. I mean, one of the other problems that we've sort of haven't really touched on yet is that many individuals, including children, sort of get locked into this pattern of stimulants and sedatives. So the alarm clock drives you out of bed in the morning, and many of us will then consume lots of caffeinated drinks. Children are drinking lots of these highly caffeinated and glucose-rich drinks. Adults tend to have lots and lots of coffee. But caffeine can stay in the system for some considerable time. And then, it's nighttime. You realize you need to go to sleep, but you're not feeling tired. And then there's the danger of using alcohol or sedatives to sedate you. And of course, they sedate you, but they don't provide a biological mimic for sleep. So you don't get many of the restorative elements of sleep. And so when the alarm clock drives you out of bed the next morning, you need more stimulants and hence more sedatives. And that sort of stimulant-sedative feedback loop is pretty terrifying for many. I mean, I chatted to a 13-year-old school girl the other day, and I said, "Do you have any problems sleeping?" And she said, "No, because I take sleeping tablets." And she's taking stimulants like Red Bull during the day to keep her awake. I mean, it is, I think, really frightening.
Who would give her sleeping tablets at 13?
I know. I don't know whether she was being prescribed them or that she was stealing her parents' sleeping tablets. But this is a pattern which I sort of warned about, and when I had direct contact with it in this fantastic young kid, it was truly chilling. The other thing that's worrying is that the teachers are a remarkable and dedicated group. I mean, I went into this school in Liverpool, and they were doing extra classes, and they were providing a phenomenal teaching environment. And their complaint was, we're providing the kids with all these resources, and then they're falling asleep in class. And so, with all of this support they're getting, they can't take advantage of it because they simply aren't getting enough sleep at night.
Do you think that the sleep being on the agenda again in the media, in newspapers, people writing about it, being honest about it, scientists being available to talk about it, is a good thing?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's you only have to look at the App Store to see how many apps there are how popular they are to get people to sleep. And the fact that, Apple are adding features like this Do Not Disturb shows that there is, a genuine worry about, the amount that we're getting. So, yeah, I think it's a great thing.
Michelle?
Yes, I think it's important that we understand sleep and its importance for health, and that people become aware of sleep in the population and what they can do to improve their sleep. So, as we were saying, avoiding the stimulant and then sleeping pill cycle, getting rid of all the electronic devices from children's bedrooms, etc. I think if we start to actually begin to understand sleep, then we become less frightened about it. And as we were saying, there are cycles of sleep. You do tend to go into deep sleep and then lighter sleep throughout the night. And if we understand that that's what happens, and we're more likely to wake up when we're in light sleep, we're not going to be worried when we wake up. We just think, I've just come out of light sleep, I'll go back into deep sleep again. And I think if people understand that you have these cycles throughout the night, they get less frightened because they've woken up and less anxious, and then they go back to sleep. So I think it is a good thing that we are having a discussion about sleep and people understanding it better.
Are you busy blogging, writing about your sleepless nights, Richard?
I haven't actually written about it for recently, but mainly because my sleep's actually improved a great deal. So I think Professor Foster touched on it earlier, and also Dr. Miller did as well just now, about really the key is not worrying about your sleep if you do wake up, because the more you worry about it, the less likely you're going to sleep. So it's very important that people are talking about it and doing research on it and reading about it, because it is a problem that we're not getting enough sleep. I think that the fact that people try and live this 24-hour lifestyle where they're coming home, staying up all night watching television, watching their Sky Plus or whatever, it's a problem, because then you wake up the next morning, you're not feeling able to tackle the problems that the next day is going to provide or present you with. So getting enough, the right amount of sleep is important, but I think also that people don't worry about it if they do wake up.
Professor Foster, what are you most concerned about in terms of a legacy of not sleeping and stimulants being used to keep you awake and sedatives being used to make you go to sleep?
I think it's all part of our disregard that we as a species are independent of our biology. And we carry with us 3.5 billion years of evolutionary baggage, and right embedded in our brain, in our central nervous system, is a biology of sleep, and it's providing us with critical and vital things, not least our sense of humour, let alone our intelligence. And God, we need a sense of humour. And the fact that we must embrace this part of our biology. It's part of us, and we cannot disregard it. And I think we are changing. I think we are going back to taking sleep to our breast and giving it a good old cuddle, because that's what we need to do.
The apps and technology then almost does have its role as a replacement for sedatives or stimulants, in that maybe by understanding sleep, you understand your own inner biology and therefore come to terms with how you sleep, as opposed to trying to help or hinder it in another way.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's, using technology, it's improving all the time. The capabilities, the devices are improving all the time. So the things that you had to go to like a sleep lab to work out what was happening, you can now do, albeit in a very limited fashion, on your phone, in your own home. So as that technology increases and improves, which it invariably does, I have no doubt the capabilities of what it can do for us will improve also.
Can we find a perfect sleep balance? Is there hope?
I think that we can find a perfect sleep balance, yes. I think when people understand that sleep is important and take it more seriously and don't give it the respect that it needs, I think that then we'll begin to find the individual balance for each person, and each person will need different amounts of sleep.
Finally, I'm going to ask you, Richard, are you a lark or an owl?
I'm definitely an owl.
I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on The Voice of Russia. Professor Russell Foster, neuroscientist and expert in sleep at the University of Oxford. Dr. Michelle Miller, founder of the Sleep, Health and Society Research Programme at Warwick University. Richard Gray, the Sunday Telegraph science correspondent. And Simon Lee, co-founder of Locassa, an app development studio in London.